Welcome, Commander.
BattleTech is an upcoming turn-based strategy game set in the classic MechWarrior universe. Fans of the series will see many familiar mechs return for duty, albeit in a somewhat different format from what previous MechWarrior computer games have typically been up to now, with only the most hardcore fans likely being intimately familiar with this particular inception of the universe. I just mentioned in my opening sentence what genre of game this is, so it should come as no surprise to learn that the game is relatively slow-paced, and it makes no attempt to hide this fact. It's traditional, methodical strategy through and through. The game is as deep and considerate as one might expect from its pacing. The player must consider a multitude of factors at any one time, such as their positioning and facing to minimize risk and damage from attack, effective range of their weapons, the heat generated from weapon fire that can cause your mech to shut down and do damage, stability of your mech, active buffs and debuffs, pilot statistics, abilities, chance to hit modifiers, and also environmental factors that the player must consider how they negatively and positively affect your mech. One simple example being how water affects you. While standing in it, movement distance is logically decreased, but you also generate less heat from firing and can disperse a larger amount of heat per turn, potentially increasing your offensive capability at the cost of movement. All of this, of course, being dependent on the player's ability to utilize these factors to their advantage. After everything I've just mentioned, the player has to consider, combined with the brief amount of gameplay footage behind my voice, it should already be clear whether this game is your cup of tea or not. Regardless, we can say with confidence, the game knows exactly what it is, and it doesn't pretend otherwise. Going back to the topic of mech movement, BattleTech treats movement somewhat differently to what you would traditionally expect from this genre, in that it is highly encouraged by the developers. It's nearly always to the player's benefit to move their mechs whenever possible, as it grants a defensive bonus depending on how you've chosen to move. Normal movement grants a standard defense increase based upon how far you've moved, with larger distances granting larger bonuses, this defense increase negatively impacting your enemy's chance to hit you. Sprinting allows further movement distance and grants a significant 50% evasion chance against all ranged attacks until your next action. The trade-off being you can take no more actions with that mech for the turn. This movement encouragement mechanic flies in the face of what is traditionally encountered in the genre where gameplay is quite slow and static, and setting up advantageous positions and holding those positions is the usual precursor to victory. But in BattleTech, the player that moves more generally has a reasonable advantage in combat, and asking the player to keep on the move, where the pacing of gameplay seems to contradict this idea, did take me several hours to adapt to and accept. But once I did, I found it a refreshing and interesting addition that added more depth to gameplay, and made matches less static and more dynamic to watch, even if some of the movements being made were meaningless for positioning purposes and only to grant the defensive bonus. There are other features I haven't touched on either, such as being able to topple mechs, allowing for what's called a called shot that can target a body part of choice, a morale bar that can be used to inspire pilots, increasing their hit chance, pilot abilities that can turn the tide of battle if used well, melee and jumping attacks, squad customization for mechs and pilots alongside their special abilities and more. Now, I'm not very experienced with this genre, and it's important to note my frame of reference is quite limited. So, I think I have approached this game with an amount of uncertainty the average gamer may face when looking into a more niche or unfamiliar genre. Through my life, I've played and finished many turn-based games, but I've never been particularly good at strategy games due to mostly lacking the patience to watch battles unfold out of my direct control. So, to put it another way, I've always preferred being responsible for pulling the trigger rather than just relying on chance. So until now, I've never played through any strategy game longer than a few hours. For myself, though, patience has come with age, as has my demand for more cognitively interesting and challenging mechanics in my games that reward consideration of actions, alongside an understanding of the world's rules, to allow me to be successful. I've no doubt there are plenty of other games out there that can scratch this itch also. Some of the longer-running RTS franchises come to mind, although few are found in the mainstream. As a prospective player looking into those games, the mechanics and rules can seem so bloated and obtuse that the amount of time it seems to ask of me to hope to be successful is repelling and unwelcoming, especially considering the lack of free time the average working adult has in the modern day. BattleTech is certainly not lacking in deep mechanics and rules also, and much time and attention and understanding is required to maximize your performance as a player. It can be intimidating at first, but BattleTech shows an understanding of the average time-starved working adult that is its target audience by giving us very functional presets from the get-go that the player need only have a basic understanding of each mech's weapon ranges to perform adequately. And should the player wish to delve deeper, then they may do so at any time, at their own discretion. To conclude, BattleTech is a game that knows exactly what it is and who it's made for. It does not seem to compromise or dilute itself to attract an audience that does not belong, all the while still offering an opportunity for curious, unexperienced players like myself to test the waters without being heavily penalized for not completely understanding the ins and outs of the mechanics. Once you allow yourself to see it, there is very much to consider with every turn, and successful exploitation of these factors is incredibly satisfying, and becomes more so as you peel back the layers. As the game is still in beta and feature incomplete, there is certainly plenty more still to come. For example, multiplayer, a story campaign, and additional mechanics are likely to see an introduction. For anyone with even a passing interest in mechs or this genre, I strongly recommend you keep an eye on this one.